Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to the Psyched Soul Talks. Good to see you all. Get yourself situated. We'll get started in just 1 minute. People are still coming in. Welcome, everyone. All right. So good to see everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for joining us. My name is Shiri Godasi. I am the founder of the Psyched Soul Talks Integration and Soulpreneurship series. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Greg Lawrence, psychedelic integration specialist. We'll do a proper intro in just a second. First and foremost, why are we here today? The purpose of the Psyched Soul Talk series is to share about the wild and empowering journey from psychedelic therapy to creating paradigm-shifting careers in the psychedelic revival. We also share about the craft of psychedelic integration from a professional and decolonized standpoint. And if you're here, you're going to get an inside view into stories of context, which is why we do it, and also learn practical skill sets of how we do it. We have here one of the trailblazers of the LA community, and we're going to hear all about his journey, which I've been so fortunate to witness myself and be a part of to a degree. More people are still coming in. Let's get them in here. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, more and more and more. So we have just a little bit of housekeeping before we get officially started. Some housekeeping for you. Please keep yourselves muted the whole talk, and we'll do a Q&A at the end. So please keep all your questions. Do not put them in the chat during the conversation because it's a little distracting. You can feel free to chat with one another, but no questions to our guests during the until the designated Q&A time. Also, please, you know, as we're here, we're speaking through a very sensitive and stigmatized topic in the psychedelic revival. We're talking about modalities. Some modalities, substances are in some places are illegal, they're illicit. So any information that's offered here today is, we do not in any way encourage or condone the use or purchase or the sale or transfer of any illegal substances, of course. Please don't partake in any unlawful activities. Please do not use this platform to procure any illicit substances or make connections or anything like that. This is not why we're here. And please respect our community space so we can all keep safe and continue having these conversations. All right. Thank you for honoring that. And we have tons of new faces here today. Awesome. Those of you who are new here, we don't know each other yet. So again, my name is Shiri Godasi. I'm considered to be a pioneering psychedelic positive creatrix. I'm an activist, I'm a coach, and I'm a visionary entrepreneur and a mother. About 6 years ago, I've started my conscious psychedelic journey, utilizing psychedelics for psychological, spiritual growth and activism. And I've created 5 psychedelic organizations in this time. And one of them is a registered 501c3 nonprofit community, which I'm super proud of. It's about to turn 5 years old next month. Also, I've originated an integration methodology, and I'm also the creator and director of a certificate program called the Psyched Soul Play School of Integration and Soulpreneurship. And my mission, more than anything, is to inspire new paradigms in wellness and in business and spirituality through normalizing weirdness. So I aim to create a world that celebrates the beauty and diversity and authenticity. And I believe there is space in this renaissance for everyone. And I'm all for unleashing wild and creative aesthetics through psychedelic use. And my friend Greg Lawrence, who's the name is misleading. He's not Catherine Allman. This is as soulmate, right, Greg?
Yes, I will change that.
Yeah. So Greg, let me do a quick intro, your official intro. So you are a psychedelic integration specialist and a transformational coach. In addition to your private practice, you also work with the Transpersonal Center, which is a psychotherapy practice in Los Angeles, where you provide integration coaching. You're also one of the primary leaders of Psychedelia Integration, which is my nonprofit, where you facilitate psychedelic integration circles. You're also a member of Inner Space Integration, where you serve as a member of the Integration Provider Network. And you're also a certified integration coach, a certified NLP practitioner, and a master instructor in integrated energy therapy. And
wow, I didn't know all that.
Yeah. And let's also add that I would like to also own that Mr. Greg Lawrence is a very close friend of our families. And can we get into how we know each other, first of all? Like, how
Sure.
did this happen?
Well, I mean, that all goes back to my story of how I got here, which you already know, so I don't need to tell you. Oh, wait, there's more people here. I do need to tell
more people.
Okay. So should I tell that story?
Let's tell that story. This is a
All
great
right.
segue into the why. Yeah.
All right. So I used psychedelics along with many other substances through my late teens up to my late 20s. Unfortunately, during my late 20s, I got mixed up with hard drugs as well. My drug of choice was meth, which at the time we snorted, we didn't smoke. That was just not a thing then. And my life spiraled out of control. I was living in a little cheap weekly motel. I don't remember what happened to my car, but at some point I didn't have a car. I lost my job. I had no visible means of support, and I was about to hit bottom. And fortunately, I was pulled out of that physical environment. And I managed to move away from that area, which was the South Bay, up to the valley, and I stopped using all substances except for cannabis, which I abused for about 20 years, basically trying not to feel my feelings. And about 7 years ago, my wife at the time passed away during the night. Woke up and my wife had died. And I was completely shocked, thrown into grief. And during that period of grief, I realized I had a mountain of childhood trauma that had not been addressed. Serious things that had been swept under the carpet. So I struggled for a while, then I eventually reached out to a psychotherapist, a coach. And during that time, I was smoking cigarettes and I was trying to quit. My coach said, I heard there's some study that said psilocybin helps with that. So I knew about mushrooms. I'd done mushrooms plenty of times, and I went and I found some and I took them, and boom, I learned what happens when you have an intention. I saw everything that had happened in my life in a completely new light. I saw why I was doing the things I did. I saw why I was struggling the way I did. I saw the causes of it. I saw the manifestation of it. It was all just very clear. So when it was over, I said, wow, now that I've seen that, everything's going to be different. And in about 3 or 4 weeks, everything was the same. So rinse, repeat, tried that a couple more times, the same thing. I had these big bang experiences, but afterwards, nothing was happening. I just was waiting for the changes to happen. So I started studying and I found out about something called psychedelic integration. What is that? Well, there's a lot of different ideas about it, but then I looked around further and I found a psychedelic integration circle. Like, well, I have to go to that thing. I go in, who is hosting it, but Shiri, Godasi, and Ashley Booth. In Santa Monica, I'm at this integration circle and people are talking about psychedelics. I'm like, this is a very weird space. I didn't know there was such a thing as an integration coach. And honestly, I had like an intellectual crush on you and Ashley. It's like, oh my God, I want to know these people. But, you know, I was too shy at the time to say that. But I started going to integration circles that you were holding at Kathmandu at the time. And I got involved in the community, and I started to realize that if I wanted things to change after the experience, when I'd seen the things that happened, when I knew the things that needed to change, I needed to do that myself. So I started developing my own sort of integration practice, which has a lot to do with making changes in your life sequentially using the information that you've gained from your psychedelic experiences. That's how I work with clients to this day, because it worked for me.
Yeah.
So I was there when we had 2, 3, 4 people in the room sometimes for integration circles. And it started to grow. Eventually you asked me to lead a circle. I've been leading those for 5 years now, but I think it was 3 years ago I started coaching. I was already counseling people, but not really doing it as a coach. And 2 years ago, I went full time. I closed a successful IT staffing business that I had and dove into this. This work kept coming in, and I was sort of telling the universe, like, sorry, I'm busy with this business. And it kept putting it into me. And I finally like, oh, I get it now. So I put this aside and focused on this. And I'm just proof positive that you can make a change way late in life and do what you love. Do what you love. I love my work every single minute of every single day. I couldn't be more thrilled to be doing what I'm doing. And you said you had a part to play in this. You had a major part to play in this. You showed me that this could be done. You are an example and an inspiration to me. So I thank you for that.
Thank you. And this was basically like the cliff notes for, I feel like, the entire podcast that we're having here, right? And that the journey from desiring or seeking psychedelic therapy and healing for our own issues that we're experiencing in our lives, really, like, as we say in the business world, we're always our first client, right? And we begin looking for the answers. And of course, they say when the student is ready, some teacher arrives. Every person has their different teachers. And I totally remember, and now I want to get a little more detail to the journey, right? So first of all, you mentioned a few interesting facts. So we're talking about the time where integration, just as in general, wasn't that popular. So this was 2016. When we, myself and Ashley Booth, which is another psychedelic activist in Los Angeles, recognized that there is no integration support almost anywhere. And we both felt like this was a necessary service, because we knew that there was a big demographic of psychedelic users that didn't have support. So we desired to offer this support, and we just went ahead and created an event. Called it an integration circle. Was the first one that we've ever heard of. We didn't know how to host it, so we just came up with some type of structure that seemed relevant for us, a meditation and introduction, and then bringing in some relevant topic. Please keep yourselves muted, by the way. You want us on the call. Please mute yourselves. Thank you. So we just created the space, and 30-something people showed up for that first event. I remember that. And we went on to hold them monthly. We need to mute ourselves, everyone, please. Everyone take a moment and look at your microphone and make sure you're muted. Please. Okay, thank you so much. So basically, like, it went from like the concept of we need to have this service to creating a space, and people started showing up, and we began having them very regularly. Very much regularly. And then there came a time where I decided, Ashley and I decided to part ways, and I began Psychedelia. And indeed, we began having the circles in the back of the store in Kathmandu on a weekly basis. And Greg was the one that showed up circle after circle after circle. Even when I remember sitting there and never knew if anyone would show up. Again, this was all just a big experiment in creating a space for psychedelic support. But Greg would always be there. Greg would be like the guardian angel that came and offered solid presence And yeah, you've totally been with us from the beginning. And now you're leading circles. You have completely made the transition. I think on a call recently, you mentioned that you have officially closed your other business entity that you had, because you're now, again, you're working full time and you're all completely booked for months on forward. So let's backtrack a little bit more. So what role did integration play in your journey? How exactly did you utilize integration first and foremost for yourself before you decided to turn this into a career?
Well, first I want to back up a little bit when you're talking about you and Ashley starting all of this. People like to knock Los Angeles because of the buildings and the lights, everything. I love Los Angeles.
Yeah.
I just love it here. I look at the skyline and I think that is a beautiful work of art. But one of the things I'm most proud of is that the psychedelic community in Los Angeles was largely built by two women, you and Ashley Booth, in a largely male-dominated culture. You forged ahead and helped build this community. So thank you very much. Girl power all the way.
Thank you. That is true. Ashley is definitely a force of nature. We both also founded Inner Space Integration together. That was actually our first integration entity, our first psychedelic organization. So yeah, a lot of water has definitely gone under the bridge for sure. And you were there, and let's get back to you, because you were there from day one. Every offering that we put together, every integration circle, the intensive that I began hosting at my house. If you remember that, we had the
I do remember.
Integration intensive.
Yep.
All these different services and offerings that, again, it was just an experiment to see what do people need and what would stick. You were there. So tell us about your experience first as a client. Like how did it impact your life?
Well, when I tried to figure out what was going on to discover the concept of integration, I started digging in. And what I found for me was I had information that I had basically given myself during this experience, because we're a co-author of the experience. If you will, the substance is the chef, the pantry is our body, our life experience, everything that's happened to us up to the moment that substance starts working in our bodies, which is the moment that we start thinking about it, by the way. But I had this information. I learned there was a lot of neuroplasticity going on. So my brain is ready to make new neural connections, but it doesn't do it automatically. If I want to make a new neural pathway, maybe I can pick up a pen and write left-handed. I'm a right-handed person. Now I'm forging that pathway. It doesn't happen automatically all the time. There's an environment created that's conducive to these new neural pathways. I also knew that because, and I'll go into this in a presentation later, because I'm trying to protect myself, because my subconscious is trying to protect me, I'm extremely resistant to change. I learned that I know what changes need to be made, but when it comes time to make them, I get frightened and I back up. And then I figured out that emotions are not information. Emotions can be deceiving sometimes. Emotions scare you away from the edge of the cliff when you really need to jump off sometimes and let go. So I started on a path of learning different modalities like cognitive behavioral therapy, neurolinguistic programming. I gobbled up as many spiritual and personal development philosophies and disciplines as I could, and tried to see what worked for me. What tools could I use to dive in and make the changes that I needed to make myself after a journey? I went for low-hanging fruit. I tried for easier things. And I found that as I made those changes, the process of making changes became known to me. It became easier. You still have resistance, but you know what that resistance is from. I started making changes in myself and my life, even though it felt difficult. And I knew at times, sometimes my brain was telling me that'll never work. That person doesn't know what they're talking about. Maybe you shouldn't do this. That's not a good idea. I don't think this is safe. You should get away from that. So I just determined to back up and make my decisions about what changes needed to be made, and then make them in the face of resistance, basically in the face of fear. That's basically how I work with integration. I know what it is I need to do. How can I go about doing that in a way that is engaging to me, where I can see some results, where I can actually make the changes that will have a positive impact on my life? And sometimes minor shifts in a person's behavior or their habits can lead to profound changes down the road.
Yeah. So it sounds like you really went into the aspect of the resistance, the fear, these are very common, obviously common denominators in the field of psychedelic use. So how did you actually see them coming up in your life? Can you give us real life example of where did this fear come up? Where did this resistance come up for you? You mentioned that you were going, circling through grief, through letting go of, a marriage to a person that you loved. Also, again, shifting careers, moving to a new town. So what are some real life examples of that and the integration like materializing in your life?
I'll tell you a very strange example that's kind of unique. When I'm in the middle of making changes in my life and I'm recognizing that I have flaws and I have blocks and I have certain things that are holding me back, I'm driving down the freeway with a few friends one day and traffic slows down. We're going from the 101 to the 405 and it comes to a stop and we creep along and finally we come to the problem. A lot of red lights, and on the other side of the freeway, a car is flipped over on its roof. Someone in the car says, wow, somebody probably died in that accident. And I say, well, you never know because cars flip over and sometimes they flip 10 times and people walk away from accidents without a scratch. And I'm suddenly, this voice in my head said, why are you saying this? And more importantly, why does it feel like you need to say this? Why do you feel compelled to say this? It was compulsive. And I realized that's a thing that I do. When someone mentions a potential problem in the world, I immediately try to whitewash it so that there are no problems in the world. That's how I keep things calm. Just by not acknowledging problems, by saying, maybe there's not a problem, we don't know, let's all just slow down for a second. And I realized that sometimes the way that trauma is manifested is through weird habits and adaptive behaviors that make us feel safe. There are behaviors that we do that are sort of compulsive, that we do again and again, that it seems like they're going to help, seems like they're going to make our anxiety worse. We never get the reaction or response we want, and somehow it makes our anxiety worse. But we keep doing them. It's a protective mechanism, an adaptive behavior that came from something that happened a long time ago. So when we're very small, something happens to us. It might be a little much for us. It's a little overwhelming. We might dissociate a little bit, and our subconscious steps in and it says, don't worry. From now on, I'm going to make sure that when something like this happens, you're going to do or not do, say or not say this, and you won't get hurt again. Yeah. Now, our brains are ingenious at crafting these adaptive behaviors, hiding them from us so we can't find them or change them, planting them on different situations and scenarios throughout our lives. But they're really kind of dumb when it comes to knowing that, yes, that helped me back here, but now it's in my way. It's actually not helping now. Your brain is still convinced that there's danger and you need to do this thing. If your subconscious was in charge of your outdoor life, you wouldn't walk out of the house because of the time that you stubbed your toe or sprained your ankle. It's that strong. We all have the experience of sitting on the couch and someone we love says something and we know we shouldn't say something back to them. We know it's going to be a bad idea and we know we're going to regret it, and it comes out anyway. That's how strong that protection is. I'm striking out at this person to get back to make sure that I'm safe. So I started finding out these sort of compulsive behaviors or counterproductive behaviors in my life, things that I was doing that weren't leading to the results that I wanted. That included things like, I'll give you another example. I was standing with you and Josh one night after a circle. Josh Ling. Hello, Josh.
Josh, are you here?
I don't know if he's here.
Okay, Josh, yes.
But two things happened. So Josh had planned a movie night on Thursday. Who wants to go see this movie? I said, I'll go. Great. So this is after circle. It's on Wednesday. So I'm standing talking to you and him. First thing that happens is you gave me a compliment. My standard response to compliments my entire life has been to be self-deprecating and deflect them. And at some point during the psychedelic experience, I realized, that's like someone handing you a gift and you give it back and say, no, thanks, I don't want this. It feels bad for the other person. It doesn't get what you wanted to get. It's not achieving the outcome that you want. It's a protection that makes no sense. I'm going to insult myself in a very clever way, which I learned from my father. He was great at insulting people in a way that made them feel good. I learned to do that with myself, put myself down subtly. Someone would say, you're the man. I'd say, well, I'm one of them. Stupid things like that. Drop a pen, I call myself an idiot. But I would never accept compliments. You gave me a compliment. I don't remember what it was, but I remember biting my knuckles and not saying anything, thinking you need to just let this soak in. I stopped. That was one of the first times that I wasn't self-deprecating in the face of a compliment. 2 minutes later, Josh was leaving and I said, I'll see you tomorrow. And he said, tomorrow? And I said, it's movie night. You planned it. And he said, oh yeah. I started to do what my dad did and make that second joke, which he would appreciate the attention. We would have all laughed, but it would have felt a little bit bad to him. And it would have been me taking a little bit of a jab at him and copying my father. So I bit my tongue and I walked out of that meeting and I sat in the car for 5 minutes thinking, holy shit, I just addressed two of those things. And I can't believe how much better I feel after something so simple as accepting a compliment and not making the second joke with someone. I can't believe the weight that's off my shoulders.
Mm.
That was super eye-opening. There are things that we do and things that we don't do that we carry around that make us tense and anxious that we don't see. They're adaptive, protective behaviors, and there are ways to get around those behaviors. And it feels like they're going to make you feel better. That's why you do them, but you never feel better. In the long run, you feel worse. They're soothing behaviors, like someone's complimenting me, this doesn't feel good, I'm just going to throw that back. Oh, I feel better. And then later it doesn't feel good because you didn't take the compliment. So you must not think much of yourself. Somewhere back here, that sinks in.
Mm. The ability to basically like sit in the seat of awareness, front row center, and just observe the mechanisms of the brain and the ways of the personality, the functions, and rather the trauma patterns, right? What you're describing really, you know, the inability to take a compliment, the resorting to the same behavior that you were modeled by your father. These are all traumatic responses that have been ingrained in your brain and your psyche. And then of course, there's just a tendency to repeat that because it is self-serving. It protects you from having to face a potentially uncomfortable situation, or one that has been experienced as experienced as uncomfortable in the past, oftentimes by our parents, by our primary caregivers who have adopted this behavioral mechanisms and again modeled it to us. So I love how you're just able to articulate, and like the image that kept playing in my mind when you were sharing about that is like a pin drop in our ability to just observe the pin dropping, like just a crystal clear awareness of all these little neural pathways that are the unconscious at play, basically.
Yeah, what you said is exactly right. These are manifestations of trauma. So there are different ways to approach those manifestations. One is sort of a therapeutic approach where people talk about things that happen and sort of reframe them and come to a realization. The other part is working top down on those manifestations of trauma. I can do something about using exposure. I can replace that behavior. I can examine it and see whether or not it makes sense. I can dip my toe in the water and see if maybe I can modify it a little bit. You can examine these things and figure out ways to work at them if you know enough modalities. And that's sort of how I work. I work sort of bottom up and top down, but you can address the manifestations of trauma. At a certain point, it doesn't matter why it's there, where it came from. Is it generational? Did it come from my parents? Is it from outer space? Is this karma? At a certain point, it doesn't matter because it's the manifestation of that trauma that is the problem for you. That's what needs to be addressed. And you can talk about it until the cows come home and you can see it in a psychedelic journey. That doesn't mean it's going to change unless you do something proactively to change it.
Exactly. Oh, exactly. So a lot of us, right, in this space, myself included, for years, just being addicted to the why, needing to know why these things happened to us. Why were we abandoned? Why were we mistreated? Why there was this emotional enmeshment? And of course, you know, state your psychological issue in memory. And then we get to a point where we understand, as Greg said, the why doesn't matter because you can dwell on the why until the end of time. Sometimes it goes down to the collective consciousness, and then you can completely get lost in there and go into realms that have nothing to do with you necessarily. But what really matters is how do we get out of it? And I find that integration really is the roadmap for the how.
Right? Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
So how do you implement, what is the how for you, right? So you've mentioned one technique that I love, I'm a big fan of, basically like the zoom in and the zoom out. So to be aware enough to develop that awareness of seeing reality, observing reality as it is without sugarcoating it, without repressing it. And then from that seat of awareness, zooming in and out, you can go in and you can go out to see the context of it. So what other techniques do you use in your integration support?
For myself or for others?
Both.
Okay, so for myself, a big part of it was body awareness. It's not possible to feel an emotion in your brain. Our thoughts exist in our brain, so we think that's where everything's happening. But every emotion is a feeling in your body connected to a story in your head. When a child feels a smack on his butt and he turns around to look at his father, he's looking to see if he is scowling, in which case he will have been punished and he'll cry, or if he's laughing, in which case they're playing and he'll laugh and run, they'll play some more. I worked with someone once who was a competitive surfer who had social anxiety. And we finally determined that the feeling that he had when he opened a door and walked into a room full of people, which was terrifying, was pretty much the same feeling that he had when he was on top of a wave getting ready to take off. One was exhilarating, one was terrifying. It was just the story in his head that made it different. So one of the things that trauma does in order to hang on and stay in you, because trauma thinks it's necessary, trauma thinks it needs to hang on to you and stay in you to protect you. One of the things it does is when strong emotions start to come up, it cuts you off from the neck down. Anytime you're really angry, really sad, and having very strong emotions, check in and see if you are in your body, if you can feel what's happening in your body, because often we'll just go round and round in the hamster wheel, thinking and thinking and thinking about what happened and what that person did and what I should have said and what should have happened. Dropping into your body allows you to find out that you might think you're angry, but you're really very sad. It might help you tap into a feeling that came from a long time ago that's trying to be processed. Emotions have an arc. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. We stop a lot of them in the middle and they get stuck in our body. We're not made to be storehouses of unprocessed emotions and traumatic incidents in our lives. So eventually they keep building up, and I can handle this. It's okay. I can take this. And then it gets to here and it's too much. Now it's like we're holding a closet that's packed full. And if we let go, it's going to come flying open. Everything's going to fall on us. We need to do something about it. Dropping into our bodies allows us to feel those emotions as they come up without judgment, without a story, and let them do what they wanted to do in the first place, and that's process. Just be felt. All emotions want is to be felt. We have a lot of them stuck in us that we can't feel, that we're trying not to feel. That's certainly what I was doing as an addict and when I was using cannabis, trying not to feel my feelings. It's the worst thing I could think of. Because the brain will tell you, in order for you to hang on to that trauma, which it thinks is protecting you, it will tell you that you should not go near that. It's going to be so bad. If you start getting angry, you're going to turn into the Incredible Hulk and you're just never going to stop raging at people. And if you get sad, you're going to descend into a pit of despair from which you could never be extracted. Neither of which will happen. It's just a strong emotion. And by the way, it's one that you've already felt. You felt that emotion before. That's why the red flag is up and it's keeping you away. Your subconscious is telling you not to go near those emotions because they're too much for you. They were at one time. When it stopped in the middle and created this adaptive behavior that you now have, it was too much for you. But you were little then, most likely. You didn't know much about the world. You know more now. You can handle more. You get it. There's context. Your subconscious doesn't know that. It still thinks you're a baby and you can't handle things. So it's becoming aware of what's happening in your body, becoming aware of those emotions that are coming up, letting them happen. It is observing the things in my life that are happening that I don't think are working somehow. It's wondering why, it's really wondering what's happening to me. What's happening to me? All these things are happening. Why are they happening? I have all these problems. When you start down a path of personal and spiritual development, one of two things will happen. Either you'll start off with a number of problems, let's say 72. And after a while, you have 69 and 64 and 53. And before you know it, you've got 42 problems and nothing outside of you has changed. That's one thing that might happen. The other is that you might have 72 problems, but you're not making a problem out of that. Basically, you're looking for where the resistance is. What's not working for me? What's upsetting me? What's a problem for me? What's happening to me? Okay, that's happened. Is that happening to me? Where is my responsibility in that? What actions am I taking? People will say things like, none of my friends value my opinion. They all think I'm negative. Who picked those friends? Are those friends anything like your family? Is that the same thing you went through when you were young? Why is this happening to you? There's a good chance that you have some responsibility in this. Not always. There's trauma and there's harm that comes to you in which you have no responsibility. Then your only outlet, your only responsibility is a mental shift that you can make about what happened. That's sort of the crux of it. Can I make a change in my environment? Can I make a change in my life? Do I need to make a change up here? This is the only one that I have control over most of the time. So working with other people, you look for that. What is the resistance? What's the problem they're having? Let's talk about that. You tell me about it. I'm going to figure out where you're at in this thing, what the adjustment might be, what's happening. Is something happening? You making it happen? You bringing it in? Are you creating an environment to keep you in a place where you think that you are what you were told you were when you were young? Because we do things all the time when we create environments that keep us thinking that we are less than, just like we thought when we were young. There are certain things that are implanted in us. If I want to look at my beliefs about people of different religious beliefs, race, ethnicity, sexual preference, those are easy to look at. I know where those are. I can examine my biases. Some beliefs are core beliefs, meaning they were shown to me or told to me before I was able to analyze or evaluate things. And I just think that that's the way things are. I think that I'm less than, but I don't think that's a belief. I just think that's the truth. And nothing anybody tells me is going to change that. I have to chip away at it, and I have to change things until I'm finally able to see that everything's okay. I'm not doing the things that reinforce that. I'm not creating environments that reinforce that. I'm not creating situations that keep me stuck in that victim mode, in that mode of thinking that I am less than, or I am whatever I was defined as when I was small. So in my approach in integration, that's what I look for. Where's the resistance? What's happening? What's the problem in your life right now? What are you unhappy about? And then we look at that.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then seeing how, it's not happening to you. It's happening for you. Right. And
Absolutely.
And then you're an NLP professional as well. So certainly there's also an aspect, and I'd love for you to speak to that, of reprogramming our language and seeing how really our language constructs create our reality. Why is everything happening to me all the time? Well, could it be that the omnipresent source, the universe, God, choose your source, creating these situations for you to bring your awareness to you that there is a certain reality that is being avoided, a certain memory that has been repressed. So it is indeed being recreated constantly, unconsciously, until you observe the pattern.
Hitting you in the head over and over until you either give up or you say, that's enough, I need to do something about this. Right. But yes, certain things, let's talk about internal environment, for example.
Yeah, perfect.
So in The Untethered Soul, Michael Singer talks about the voice in your head. And he says, if you want to have an interesting experiment, why don't you imagine that everything that's coming from that voice is coming from a person that's following you around all day. Now, if you had a friend who followed you around all day, who spoke to you the way that you speak to yourself, who changed its mind so capriciously, as that voice does, who is so negative so much of the time, it wouldn't take long before you would tell that person to just get away. I don't want anything to do with you. You're rude to me, you're insulting, you're negative, you change your mind constantly. Every time you get a new piece of information, you're just completely unreliable and you're not pleasant to be around. But somehow it seems perfectly acceptable to do that to ourselves. When someone says, yeah, I'm always thinking I'm a loser and I'm looking for worst case scenario and it seems like everything's bleak, dismal, that seems okay. I cannot stress the importance of your internal environment and the way you speak to yourself. I used to call myself an idiot every time I dropped something. It's just a habit. You idiot. Now notice I didn't say I'm an idiot. I said, you idiot. Why is that? I'm repeating something that I heard, or at least the nature of it, that I heard a long time ago. That's not my voice. It's got the timbre and tone of my voice because that's how I hear things. But I'm repeating things I was told a long time ago, either through words or deeds. And I'm reinforcing that picture I was given of how I am, what I am, who I am, what I am less than, over and over again. So if I can clean up that internal environment just a little bit, I've made some progress. That doesn't mean you turn everything into roses and you don't deal with negativity and you don't have unpleasant emotions. That means you stop insulting yourself. That means instead of feeding yourself mental junk food constantly, and using your imagination to imagine the worst case scenario for every possible thing that could happen in your life. For once, you imagine that something might happen that's good. And for once, you cut yourself some slack. For once, you treat yourself the way that you treat other people. For once, you treat yourself the way you want other people to treat you. Now, in NLP, we learned that there are words and phrasings and things that make a big difference in the way that we perceive things. So let's look at something like nominalization. That is turning a verb into a noun. So if I say, you know, there were 60,000 rapes in this country last year, that's a statistic. If I say 60,000 women were raped last year, that's much more serious. If I talk about why I was acting out when I was a child and I say, I just wanted attention. I wanted someone to pay attention to me. Who did I want to pay attention to me? Well, my dad. There's a big difference between I wanted attention and I wanted my dad to pay attention to me. But we blunt these things so they don't hurt so much. We change actions into situations or nouns so that they're different in our minds. It's a very deceptive thing that we do so that it doesn't hurt as much. Sometimes it's protection, and that layer needs to be peeled away very slowly and very delicately. And sometimes it's just what we've learned. But we use words and pictures. There's no such thing as a thought that is not a smell, a taste, a sound, or kinesthetic feeling. We're not able to think of anything that don't have to do with our senses.
Wow.
We turn those into words. We're always using words in there. Words can be twisted around. So now instead of having this experience of wanting my father to pay attention to me, I could just use some words and just kind of blunt that. I just wanted attention. I don't know why. And that deep pain of wanting my father to pay attention to me is stuck in there, not being acknowledged.
And what about those thoughts and memories and sensations that have no words? Where do they go?
Oh, you're talking about pre-verbal?
Well, it can be pre-verbal, and of course, we're speaking to the psychedelic realm, which is largely ineffable.
Yeah.
And we know that the language constructs do create and dictate our reality. So if we have no words to describe a certain experience, be it visceral, psychic, spiritual, esoteric, then what happens to those sensations? I'm curious if you have any insight on that.
Very important aspect of psychedelic integration is that every one of those experiences will result in an emotion.
Emotion.
They'll make me feel something. It's not important why I feel that. It's not important what that symbol meant. It's not important what that weird scenario, one of the best things you can tell people about the psychedelic experience is you don't have to figure it out, especially in real time. Just let it happen. Because we all have defenses built up against words. If I don't think I'm deserving of love, literally everyone on the planet can tell me that I am, but I don't believe it. It's a core belief. So psychedelics communicate in novel and unusual ways. They'll play games or simulations. They use metaphors and stories. They'll make us feel strong emotions. People will come to me sometimes and say, I don't understand. I had this experience and I just can't get over this thing where I stole cookies when I was 9 and I feel like I have to make it up to everybody because I feel so ashamed about it. I was in a 3-hour shame spiral. Good. You got some shame out of you. I think that these substances don't have the same intelligence as us. And sometimes they look and say, wow, look at that storehouse of shame in that person. That needs to come out. What can we use? Well, there's that cookie thing. We'll just push that for a while. Let them feel this for 2 or 3 hours and get it out of themselves. One of the gifts that psychedelics get us is they provide a kind of release valve for unexpressed emotions and traumatic memories, things from our past. Sometimes people, this is a coach, people will call you and say, I don't understand. I had this really beautiful experience on Saturday. And the last 2 days, I felt like shit and I don't get it. I say, good, just sit in that for a while. That's a gift. That was in you already. Psychedelics don't make you feel anything that you don't already feel. That was inside of you. That's why you're looking for healing. So just let it out for a while and don't try to feel better. Just let it go as much as you can.
How?
By feeling it.
So what does that look like, right? So, I mean, for some of us, it may be, easy to, to hear, okay, we'll just feel it and we can sit there and allow it to feel it. What about the people that are listening to the conversation that do not have the emotional intelligence skill set to be able to process that? What are some ways that, or methods that you can suggest to clients of processing energies that, again, have no words? So you call them emotions. emotions, as we say in psychology school, they're energy in motion, meaning they're energies that we learn how to feel, we express them, can be expressed through emotions, but what are some other ways?
Well, embodiment is one. So that's something, this is in the presentation I got, but embodiment is something you have to be very careful about, because everyone is not used to feeling their bodies, and everyone doesn't feel safe feeling their bodies, especially people who've been through serious trauma. So some people who've been through serious trauma can't meditate, and mindfulness doesn't work for them. It aggravates things. If that's not the case.
And sorry, can we just say, you know, it always seems like the integration, the proper or like the common integration techniques that we always hear about are meditation, yoga, journaling. Can we just take a moment to just acknowledge that meditation is not right for everyone in integration? It's not. It can actually be very aggravating and activating to individuals, as Greg was mentioning. You know, their nervous system can no longer handle sitting, or is not accustomed to handling powerful emotions. So sitting with these emotions and meditating can actually be more detrimental to their well-being than doing any positive outcomes.
And I'll add to that things like journaling and yoga and walking barefoot in the grass and earthing are all great meditation tools. They're not in themselves especially integration tools. They're not especially integration. So if you were meditating and journaling and earthing before, and you're doing that now and nothing has changed, you haven't necessarily integrated the experience. Sometimes people mistake integration tools for integration itself. You know, Michael Pollan's book was disastrous when it came to talking about integration. His idea of integration was having a discussion with his facilitator for 30 minutes the next day, and then going and having breakfast somewhere.
Right. And that's definitely, this is a great point. Let's talk about that a little bit. Like, what is your, you know, since you've been a specialist now for a few years, you're literally one of the pioneering integration specialists that we have in modern integration. And what is your thought about the recommended or common modality of, well, integration support looks like we do 1 or 2 preparation sessions before treatment, 1 or 2 integration sessions after treatment, and then we call it a day. Then you've done your integration. What do you think to that?
I mean, that's like personal and spiritual development. It's not something that ever ends. So sometimes people have limited funds and they want to squeeze in, like, I need to do some preparation, some integration. Okay, that's fine. As long as they don't think that that's done. That's along the same lines of thinking that I'm going to take some mushrooms and be cured. I immediately tell people, you do realize that all these clinical trials you've been reading about have a significant therapeutic component before and after that experience. No one just takes mushrooms. I'm not saying there can't be transformational changes as a result of having a psychedelic experience, but most of the time you have to have some support in some way, shape, or form. But integration is an ongoing process. I mean, it is personal and spiritual development. That's a never-ending process. I'm never going to get to the end of it. I know that, no matter how far I go. No one gets to the end of it. Ram Dass was working on himself till the day he died. It's something that never ends. Exactly. Yes, you're right.
No, but really, I mean, like a part of me feels like, you know, having that modality, again, that integration modality be like the common go-to modality that many integration coaches set up in their practice, it almost sends the wrong message to clients. Like, they have these expectations that after they do a couple of integration sessions, they are done. And then you see on all these online, like, social media forums of, well, I did my ceremony, I did, these 2 sessions, but I'm still not changed, right? And to my understanding, integration is, as you said, it is a lifelong process. A single journey can take months and years to integrate and unfold if you keep being in that dialogue. And the journey is not linear. It's a spiral. It goes up, it goes down, it goes sideways, it goes into the ether. It's multidimensional. It is tantalizing. And having a support system, right? Although it's definitely not necessary, right? Integration, I just want to put it out there, is not a necessary component of psychedelic therapy work. If a lot of people gain so much value, and dare I use the word healing, from having a recreational, which is recreational, you're recreating yourself experience, standing, right near that big ass speaker at a transformational festival and just letting the drum and bass integrate them, right? And there's so much beauty and healing that comes through that. And for other people, it can be extremely useful to have another set of eyes, a witness, a person that holds the integration container over time to help usher you through. Basically, it's like a rite of passage, I think, for a lot of people, that I definitely feel you can go way deeper when you do have that integration guide by your side, as someone who has experienced that integration path on their own and also has results to show, like how has integration impacted their lives. So it's not just a skill set that can be learned just by taking a course. It's something that I feel is lived through, right? Like you yourself have lived through an integration process before you decided to turn this into a career. And I feel like this is just really important to point out. There is no replacement for personal experience in this case.
Yeah, the great thing, in my opinion, you don't have to do anything after taking psychedelics. There's nothing required. I don't like shoulds around psychedelics. You know, the only should I think this should be placed around psychedelics is you should be safe and responsible, meaning you're not going to harm yourself or someone else. After that, it's fair game. If you want to experience, you know, food, a festival, a movie, a museum, another person's body, whatever, through the lens of a psychedelic, good for you. That's what they're here for, to help you enjoy life. So nothing's required afterwards, which may sound strange for an integration coach, but no one needs to do the work. You can't do it wrong. You can't have a psychedelic experience wrong, and you can't have the aftermath wrong. Whatever you're doing is what works for you. But if you do want to make changes, if you do want to have some kind of healing process, it's very difficult to see your own stuff because of this mechanism we were talking about before. These things are implanted in us and they're hard to see, and sometimes we don't see them. So I'll give you an example by way of story. Yeah. So we all hear that, you know, we don't see objective reality. And sometimes I hear coaches talking about the frustration they have with someone's lack of desire to do what they're suggesting, or to take this path, or listen to them. So let's say that a man and wife go to Las Vegas on vacation, and they decide to see a professional hypnotist show. They go to the show, and during the show, the guy says, I need a volunteer from the audience. And his wife says, you should go up there. He wants to be a good sport, so he goes up there. Hi, who are you? Where are you from? Here with my wife. And he hypnotizes him, has him act like a chicken or whatever. And then he says, okay, now I'm going to give you a post-hypnotic suggestion. You're not going to remember this when you wake up, but whenever I place my finger on my tie, you have to take your coat off. When I take my finger off, you have to put it back on. Do you understand? Yes. Wakes the guy up. How do you feel? I'm fine. Do you remember acting like a chicken? No. Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. And then eventually he puts his finger on his tie. Now it's 60 degrees in the auditorium because for some reason they like people to freeze their asses off in those places. But this guy has been programmed. He has to take his jacket off. Now, if his arms just move, he's going to think, what's going on? Why is my jacket coming off? What happens when you are programmed like this is that your brain jumps in and gives you a reason for it. His brain tells him it's hot in here. It even controls the chemicals in his brain, so it makes his body temperature rise a little sweat drips down. And he says, you know, it's really hot. Can I take my jacket off? I says, sure. Talks for a while, and then he takes his finger off of his tie. He says, wow, I just got a chill suddenly. I'm going to put my jacket back on. Sure. Talking some more, finger on the tie. He says, it's the weirdest thing. This jacket usually fits, but it's like really tight. I need to take it off for a while. Finger off, puts it back on and on and on. This is what happens to us when a traumatic event happens to us when we're small. These adaptive behaviors are put in place. Now, if I walked up to that guy and said, dude, it's 60 degrees in here, he would say, well, yeah, but you don't understand. I've been on the stage for a while and this jacket's kind of thick and there's lights. He'd have all kinds of reasons for why he's doing what he's doing. He's not going to understand that's not reality. He's reacting to something else, his programming. Something's told him he needs to do this and that it's hot in here. And it doesn't matter what I tell him or what I want him to do. He has his own reasons and motivations. So it would be hard for that guy to figure out what kind of changes do I need to make because he thinks it's hot in there. If you talk to him for a while, if you made him comfortable, if you let him know it's okay to feel what you're feeling, there are different ways of doing it. Eventually you might look around and say, it's kind of weird. Everybody's got coats on in here except for me. Maybe I should look at that. So it's always helpful to have an outside eye to just sort of call you on what's happening and point out that things might not be the way that you think they are, or that you might be behaving in a certain way that seems rational to you and it seems like it's helpful, but pointing out that on the back end it's not working for you. Let's look at what's happening now. This is common with soothing behavior. Someone does something because it's going to feel better, and then they feel crappy about it. You have to point out to them, look, you're going to feel bad no matter what. You can feel bad now by not doing the soothing behavior. If you do that, you won't feel bad later about that behavior.
So it sounds like, let's talk more about the methodology that you employ with your clients. Okay, let's get more into that. So what does working with you look like? What role do you feel that you play in your clients' psychological and spiritual integration journey?
I think it's very important to, first of all, model for the person. I have a slide on this. We may be the first person to ever model personal responsibility, appropriate boundaries, punctuality, interpersonal relationships, conflict resolution. Some people don't know how those things work. Some people don't understand that you don't have to worry about everything that comes up until something happens to resolve it. Some people don't know how to work with their emotions. Some people don't understand how to work with people. I mean, if you don't know how to set boundaries, you've already set yourself up for a whole lot of problems, because people will test you when you don't have boundaries. And when you think about that situation, like in an office environment, like the person who will do anybody's work for them, no matter what, people don't respect that person. The person who doesn't have time, who will make time for you at 4:15 and I'll help you for 20 minutes, that guy's got some priorities and boundaries, so he feels a little bit safer. But if someone doesn't have boundaries, then people just keep pushing and testing. I need to know where your boundaries are. You're not showing me. I don't know what to do. It's just a natural thing that humans do. They need to get to know each other, like a dog sniffing another dog. If you're not telling me what you want, then I'm not sure what to do. So people need to know how to set boundaries. So modeling for clients.
So important. Yeah, sorry, I have to stop you. Boundaries. I feel like this deserves a whole entire event that needs to be dedicated to that.
Absolutely. It's one of the biggest problems that people present with.
For both the clients and integration coaches.
Absolutely.
Right.
People need to know that you are setting boundaries so they can see that it's okay to set boundaries. If someone's late twice, I tell them, look, I fully intend to respect your time, but you need to respect mine. So I expect you to be on time for sessions. Now, most of those people are never late again.
Yeah.
And sometimes people say, wow, thanks for holding me to that.
And I feel like time setting is only one very minimized aspect of boundaries. What about also the energetic and spiritual boundaries that are absolutely vital in psychedelic work, right? Because there is so much time traveling. The soul splits into a million fragments within the psychedelic space. And because of the visionary nature, because we become aware potentially of how powerful, how limitless, how infinite we are, the art of psychic recollection, collecting oneself in the integration path, of understanding exactly who I am, what are the archetypes of my energy, what makes me in the psychic world, and also what are the constraints I have in my humanity, in my human journey, how to put them both together. So yes, time management is definitely one aspect of them, and there's so much more that, again, as you say, I feel like, when you're following the guidance of an integration coach, action is so much, speaks volumes more than words ever will. It's the way that you present yourself and the way that you embody integration is how your clients will learn integration at the end of the day.
It is also the act of going through that. Sometimes these are recreations. So sometimes the things that happen in a counseling setting are not, sometimes the client needs to say something, not so that they establish a boundary and something won't happen. It's so that they can go through the act of establishing, so standing up for themselves, establishing a boundary. You can feel that when you do it. You feel better. You've been frightened away from it most of your life. And when you actually do it, it seems terrifying to do it. Just like conflict resolution. I need to stay away from conflict. Well, adults can resolve conflict and everything's fine. It's not a problem, but it seems terrifying. Some of these things we do so that we can have a felt sense of what it's like to take that action, because it's something that's missing from me as a person. I was deprived of that in my upbringing, but it's a vital part of who I am as a human. I need to be able to speak my piece and say what I want, what I need, what I deserve. And just going through that exercise, sometimes very healing for a person.
Very healing.
But back to what you said about what do we provide for clients? we also provide acceptance. You know, in therapy, it's called having positive regard for your client. You know, you give this person positive sentiment override. They haven't, for the most part, been in a place where they're accepted. And there's this weird dynamic when we're raised as humans, where it's almost necessary to tell children, like, I don't approve of you right now because you're doing this. If you do this, I will love you more. No, now you're doing that, I love you less. Oh, okay, now I love you more because you're doing what I want. And no one ever tells us, by the way, that thing's done and you're good now. So we walk around with this little voice telling us, what are we supposed to do? I'm not sure how to act so that people will accept me. What do I do so that you love me more? So sometimes people just need to be held in a container when they realize it's okay. You're okay the way you are. You don't have to do anything. You want to make some changes? Great. We can look at that and we can see what you want, but you're fine the way you are.
Yeah.
It's ultimately the message of a psychedelic experience. You're fine the way you are. You don't have to do anything. So that's very strange coming from someone who helps people do things all the time and make changes, but it's not required. It's something that's an option to you. You're okay just how you are. Let's take, for instance, the concept of having blocks. So people will have an experience. They'll say, "Oh, I was having this experience and I thought it was going to make progress. Then I just came across this huge wall that stopped me. And it was just really frightening. And I turned around and I went the other way." I tell them, do you realize how beautiful that wall is? That wall is what's kept you safe from the time you were small. That's that protection we were talking about. That wall has its arms around you, trying to keep you safe and trying to hold you. You should absolutely be thankful for that wall and accept it. The sooner we stop fighting parts of ourselves and accept them, the sooner we're going to get to a better place. So sometimes showing people, I accept that in you, it's okay, shows them it's okay for them to accept it.
And this is another wormhole in integration, right? The unconditional positive regard. Really, you're talking about validation, right? And that can take on so many different roles. What you're speaking to, first and foremost, I feel, is healing the inner child wound, which a lot of adults carry and discover, maybe not even potentially aware of, that they have when they come into psychedelic therapy. And they discover their inner child still does need to be held and acknowledged and reparented, and having that come out in the relationship with the integration coach. Basically, that the wounding happened in relation with the primary caregivers, and now it is being healed or mended in another relationship with the integration coach. So that's one aspect that comes up. And a second one is also validation for an ineffable space where if you go to a therapist, for example, a therapist that's not trained in psychedelic integration, and they're not aware of psychedelic work, they're not familiar with it, it'll be very hard to have these validating conversations with these therapists because they're not able to validate that space. So that's another aspect of unconditional positive regard that I feel is worth mentioning.
Yeah, there's a balance that has to be struck there too, because again, you have to help people realize that they need to be held accountable, that there's a certain way to adult, that they have responsibilities. So we're not just excusing anything that happens. So I have a policy. If you don't cancel with me within 24 hours, you're going to be charged for a session. Sometimes people have what they feel are very good reasons not to pay that. But I'm not going to be helping people if I help them to make excuses for behavior, for doing something they've been told about ahead of time, for a responsibility that they hold in this interaction between us.
Mm-hmm.
I give a rat's ass about the fee for the session. It really has to do with letting that person know that you have responsibilities and there are things that you have to do. And once they do it, how much I appreciate you doing that, standing up for that. So there's a balance between that unconditional acceptance and realizing, hey, there's still some rules here. There's still some ways that we have to interact together, and you have to learn that. The sooner you learn that, the better off you're going to be.
Yes, absolutely. And the way that you know yourself within the integration world as a professional, right? The way that you first and foremost know yourself, the way that you're able to hold these boundaries within yourself, when you know what your message is or the service that you want to provide to your clients, in the spiritual sense, in the psychic sense, then that message will bleed into or translate into every action, professional guideline that you hold within your practice. And again, that's how you pass on your integration views, philosophy into your clients, right? So you're talking about the boundaries. I also hold them. I send that exact message within the way that I conduct the service in the management operational sense, not just in the therapeutic sense.
Yeah, and that's very important too. Just because we have a lot of aspiring counselors on this call with us, if you're going to be in business, be in business. Don't be ashamed of being in business. Conduct yourself like a business person. Run your business like a business. That way, it's less confusing to people. What am I doing? Am I offering my services to whoever needs them for whatever? I've done pro bono work. I don't do it anymore because I expect some sort of exchange, no matter what it is, because people don't value things that are free. You know, when I see something on the curb, I slow down. If it says for sale, I might look at it a second time. It says for free, I keep going. People somehow don't value things that they get for free. So I make sure there's some sort of exchange, and I work on a sliding scale. But I do have a business. You have to pay me. You have to show up on time. I have to keep books. I have to have goals. I have to keep track of what I'm doing. I am running a business. It's helped me to be in the corporate world. But a lot of people are uneasy with the aspect of business around psychedelics. You hear things like, well, medicine should be free.
So true.
Yeah, medicine is free. Figure out what the plants are. Go to the jungle, chop them down, boil it, find a place to do it. It's all free. You can do it yourself. But if you're going to get it from someone else, you should take care of that person. That person deserves to be paid for the time. That's what we're all doing here.
For the time and the expertise, right? It just reminds me of this joke of, you bring an electrician to your home to cut one wire. So to cut one wire takes 1 second to gain the expertise that will tell you exactly which wire to cut is,
Exactly. Right.
And priceless, right? So awesome. So what other, we're going to get into a Q&A segment soon. So what other aspects of your work do you find that are completely, or skill sets are indispensable to your work with clients? And also some advice for individuals who are thinking, well, I want to make this career shift. This seems very much aligned with my path. How do you go about that? So this was 2 questions in one.
Yeah. So I'll take the how do you go about that first. Okay. How you go about that is first, you have to be a member of your community. You can't come into a community and announce that you're an expert here to help people. You have to be a member, a productive, contributing member of that community. You have to have something to say, hopefully that has your own flavor on it, your own spin. You have to have something unique to say, not just parrot other people's words. But how you get into it is by committing yourself to it, by realizing that it's not going to be easy every day, by realizing that you're going to make mistakes, and someone may even be hurt because of those mistakes, because that's what happens when you're in the helping profession. But also realizing that it's your job to be there for people. So you get into this by deciding you want to be in it, by being in business, so that you're not falling back on whatever this thing is. I don't know what it is. I thought I'd do it for a while, and I'm not sure where the money's coming from, but I'm trying to help people. You make sure you're in business, you become a member of the community, and you offer something. You offer some knowledge, you offer support, you offer acceptance to people, you offer counseling of some kind, but you do something with your community. And you make sure that you understand that this is something that you're doing as a process. And I'm sorry, the second part of that question was?
I feel like the ownership is such a big piece. Like you're announcing, like you said, announce that you're in business. And this is not just an announcement to the community, but also an announcement to yourself. And again, to the universe, who's going to back you up. Basically, you're saying, I'm doubling down on this. And this is by, just kind of maybe like advice for those of you who are thinking, well, how do I make ends meet? How do I support myself in this transition? This is the question of all questions that I feel a lot of us professionals had to rumble through when we made that decision to double down. And there's definitely a spiritual component of you have to leap and the net will appear. We don't know how, but this is really the exercise in trust that I feel psychedelics aim to teach us in some way too.
Look, I often say to people that we like to be very vague in the psychedelic community and say surrender and not explain what that means.
Yeah.
Really means you might be very scared, but you just have to write it out. All right. And people are often surprised that that's what it means, because they think surrender means something very flowery and nice. Well, if it was nice, you wouldn't have to surrender to it. But one piece of advice for people going through psychedelic experiences: if you feel like you're going to die, you should die. If you feel like you're going to fall off a cliff, you should fall off of that cliff. And if you feel like you're going to go crazy, you should go crazy. All of these are ways of surrendering. You have to let go. That is the ultimate lesson of psychedelics. You have to let go of the illusion of control. I think that I'm in much more control than I am. You know, I reside in a very deep center that is below the level of ego. Okay. Its only job is to exist. It is incapable of doing or not doing anything. So it has no responsibility. So the great thing about that is it's incapable of being anxious. It can't make decisions. It can't second guess itself. It just is. When you get into the ego, then all of the doing, not doing, controlling, not controlling, being frustrated, all of that starts. But back here, I'm not doing any of that. If I can allow myself to sit there sometimes, I can see that I can just observe what's going on in my life. I can watch myself living my life from that place. But sometimes, as you say, you have to take a leap of faith and you have to let go. And you have to know that if you have a pure intention in your heart and you let go, you see if the universe is going to bring it to you. And I want to make clear that my opinion of things about manifestation is not so much that I think that it's possible that if I hold something in my mind through prayer, intention, affirmation, or whatever, that the universe is going to turn some gears and bring things towards me. But I think a much more important aspect of it is if I hold something in my mind through prayer, intention, or affirmation, I'm much more likely to start taking actions, both conscious and unconscious, that will take me toward that goal I'm holding in my mind.
Absolutely. It's got to be a co-creative dance, right? We're not just, this is also like a very big navigation tool that I like to teach my clients. This applies to psychedelics too. You don't just surrender and lay back and let the psychedelics do whatever they want to you. It doesn't work like that. Meaning you can, but then the odds of you having what they call a challenging experience / bad trip are probably going to be way higher. Whereas really like something that I've learned in my own psychedelic ceremonial use is you learn how to dance with the spirit, with the source. You surrender to the guidance and you listen, you're in deep listening, but you act upon, you stay present, you don't check out, you don't dissociate. It's half choice and half chance. You have to be invested in it yourself. And like Greg is saying, put in the action to help get you to the goal. And there is this wonderful book, speaking of Michael Singer that you mentioned earlier, who's one of my favorite authors. So you mentioned one of his greatest books, The Untethered Soul. His other great book is called The Surrender Experiment. And it's kind of like a prequel to The Untethered Soul. And he literally tells a story of, again, how to surrender in life and how that surrender and proactively dancing with higher guidance has led him to the greatest, both spiritual and material heights that he's ever known. So thank you for that reminder.
You know, you said something in there that just, if we're talking to people who are going to be working with people in psychedelic community, I'd just like to state my opinion about something. I think it's a very bad idea. Well, let me start by saying the Zendo project years ago came up with the idea that even bad trips can just become challenging experiences if you contextualize them and you have support. Yes. Somehow that morphed into the saying that there's no such thing as a bad trip. Now, if you and I are talking sort of inside baseball, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that. But for God's sake, please telling people who had a bad trip that there's no such thing as a bad trip. It is not up to us to characterize the experience of another individual. You know, one study, people said that bad trips were among the 5 most psychologically challenging experiences of their lives. I don't know what the other 4 were, but I doubt anybody was running up to anxious to tell them that those things weren't bad. Whether it was a death or some kind of sexual abuse or trauma, no one's going to tell you that's not bad. I mean, it's possible for a childhood to forge you into a person who's very strong, who's able to help people. I'm evidence of that, but no one can tell me there's no such thing as a bad childhood. There's only difficult upbringings. Sometimes people only characterize something as bad because it's the first time they've done something like that. I actually think it was on when you were doing supervision calls at one time. I remember a counselor saying that she was very frustrated because this client of hers was doing great, but then she had a psychedelic experience and started trying to characterize her sexual abuse as a child as bad. I'm sorry, that's bad. Sometimes people blame themselves, so they make things seem not so bad. Sometimes that realization that something is bad is a breakthrough for someone. But most of all, I think that it's not harm reduction to tell people there's no such thing as a bad trip, because people will take that literally sometimes and think that there's no such thing as getting scared in a psychedelic experience. Then when they do start to get scared, which is a feature, not a bug, they think something's going wrong and resist it, and then it all goes sideways. I've heard people say things like, we don't say that because it, then people will be scared to use psychedelics. Well, if that's a possibility, then someone who doesn't want to have that shouldn't take them. Psychedelics aren't for everyone. It's not our job to proselytize and get everyone to use psychedelics. But I can understand saying, listen, even bad trips can be turned into just challenging experiences if you get some support around them. But people just blast out to someone who's had a bad trip and tell them there's no such thing as a bad trip and completely invalidate their experience, which a counselor should never do.
Exactly. Speaking about validation, right? So thank you so much for that. I feel like this kind of goes along with the current community narratives, right? Of we have to heal, we have to purge, we have to do the work. There is all this terminology. Yeah, bad trip, breakthrough, kill the ego. The ego doesn't have to die. You don't have to break through anything.
Ed Adams posted one of my favorite quotes today, and that is Alan Watts saying, trying to get rid of the ego is the biggest ego trip going.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing to get rid of. There's nothing to kill. On the contrary, integration is the exact opposite of that. It's all about acceptance. It's about acknowledgement, acceptance, embodiment. Those are the 3 stages.
Yeah, I'm making my ego my enemy.
Yeah. How is that into turning, right? Exactly, like turning yourself like against yourself.
Right, which is one of the big problems we have.
Yeah.
Lack of accepting some aspect or part of myself.
Yeah, it's perpetuating everything that is wrong with this world, right? Yeah. And thank you so much for speaking to that. That is just a pearl of wisdom. So yeah, difficult is not the same as bad, and it can be bad for some people. And you want to,
once again, you can relive something in your brain. Sometimes people relive the worst moments of their lives, but they do it so that they can be there and feel it and experience it and process it.
Right.
And yes, that may be bad at the time. You can make something out of that, but you should know that's a possibility.
Yeah. Yeah, that almost feels, yeah, that's exactly, I feel like one aspect that, I've kind of been exploring recently, and this is like, we're going to break into Q&A in just a minute, but I feel like there's a lot that happens around accepting our visionary nature and integration work, and not as much work to just embracing our humanity, right? And making space for compassion, for acceptance. As you said, you're fine just the way you are. You're perfect. There is nothing for you to fix or heal. So I feel like it's up to us as coaches, as pioneers, is to help break that stigma, speaking and going back to NLP, use the words that will help shape this integration culture, not in the way that replicates the current mental health system, but recreates a new modality. And this is a wonderful and amazing opportunity that we have right now as trailblazers of this new paradigm. So choose your words carefully. Don't fall into the current narratives of the community or the medicalized community, or even people like Zendo, for example, Zendo maps that have a certain footing in the psychedelic renaissance. Remember, this renaissance belongs to everyone, and the beauty of it is that you can literally create it in the way that you feel it needs to happen.
Create your own context.
Create your own context.
Yeah, you don't have to be in someone else's format. You don't have to listen to their context. You don't have to follow what they say. Feel into what's right for you.
Yeah.
You have special, unique gifts. So the way I work for people may not be the way that you work for people. You have to figure out what's the best, most comfortable way for you to work with people, how you go about that, what that means to you, what that looks like, free of any constraints or any format that someone else is trying to dictate to you.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Greg. I feel like we can talk for another 2 hours.
Let's do that.
Let's do that. Maybe we need a round 2 of this event. I do want to speak with you about boundaries. I feel like you'll be an excellent discussion mate for that. Any questions for Greg? Super rich conversation. Joe, yes, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, hey, great. Shiri, thank you for all the content you put out, and congratulations on your move to Costa Rica.
Thank you.
I'll also thank Ben. Ben's niche, what he puts out, the Spirit Pharmacist, has really helped us out for sure. His little niche has been really beneficial to what we're doing here. So thank him too for me. Thank you. Greg, thank you very much for putting all your stuff out, your content out. I'm not a huge fan of Facebook, but I'm not a huge fan of Facebook, but I follow the stuff that you put out, Greg, on Facebook, and I appreciate the articles that you post. I do get value out of your Facebook content.
Thank you.
Okay. So my girlfriend and I, several years ago, have started using psychedelics for personal development. I had suffered from adult depression, and we use psychedelics for spiritual development and for overall well-being, and we were very successful at it. And so our friends noticed the changes in us, and they were like, "Hey, what are you guys doing, and what's your secret?" And so we started helping our friends, right? And then so they started to get the benefits from what we were doing, and they started telling more people and more people and more people. And over the last year and a half, it's kind of developed into a psychedelic integration business by default, right? So more and more people have been coming to us over the past year and a half. I feel like one of the challenges that we have been having is I have developed a 6-step process that we take people through. However, I have a very, very hard time getting people to commit to the process, right? Like if you're going to do psychedelic work on your own and then have a psychedelic integration coach, I tell people, like, this is a 1 or 2 year process that you need to take yourself through, because, whether it's not, your past history karma or this life history of your, of your how you've been thinking for, years or decades, it's going to take a long time to unwind that. And so my question is, have you guys had problems with people like committing to the process, or have you had to shift your focus to try and manifest people who are not necessarily dabblers in psychedelic and integration work, but more seriously committed to buying all into this process as far as like this modality of healing? Because I feel like we're just not really, the people that are coming to us are just not really fully understanding or buying into what it takes to change your life. Have you noticed that in your clientele?
I'm going to sort of reframe this, and I'm going to go back to the point about someone being hypnotized. So you're talking to people who don't know that it's cold in the room. As counselors, anytime we are frustrated, if we have some dislike, some avoidance, some desired avoidance, some annoyance at our clients, their actions or lack thereof, that's on us as counselors. So there are 2 things. Number 1 is we need to figure out what we are frustrated about. So let's look at why we might be having resistance to a person. So let's say that Shiri and I both know someone named, I don't want to pick a name of someone we actually know, someone named Poindexter. Okay. Shiri loves Poindexter. She thinks he's a snappy dresser. He tells funny jokes. She just likes being around him. I cannot stand the guy. I don't like his clothes. I don't think he's funny. And for some reason, I just don't get him and I don't want to be around him. Now, he's obviously not objectively annoying because Shiri likes him. He's not socially inappropriate. So what's going on? Well, he might be displaying some behavior that I'm displaying currently, unconsciously, that I'm trying to get my own attention about. Say, look, here's that thing that you don't like about yourself. He might be displaying some behavior that I took part in the past and I have some guilt or shame around. Or he might remind me of a person, place, time, or situation which I felt unsafe. But my brain knows that if I say I'm unsafe, I'm going to look and say, well, Poindexter's 5 foot tall and 100 pounds. Why would I be scared of him? So it tells me I don't like him. But the point is, if someone is not listening to what we have to say as counselors, that's on us. So they might not be ready to hear what it is we're saying. So instead of banging our heads against the wall, we should try something else, anything else. But it's necessary for us to meet people where we are. If we have an idea of what people need to do, that's not going to work for everyone, because everyone's not at the same place in their process. And you're going to meet people who are not ready for what you have to tell them. And it can be glaringly obvious to you that something is wrong in this person's life, but they can't hear it. So the point here is, if people are not listening to what you have to say or not following a certain process, it's probably a good idea to try to shift and find something else that works for those people. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. And I will also add that number 1, we're just still, it's been about 5 or 6 years, but we are still, if you kind of zoom out again and just view where we are in terms of the effects of the war on drugs, there is still a stage where there is going to be a lot heavier need for education around what integration is to begin with. It's still being formed just as we speak, and what are the benefits that it could have for people's lives. So a lot of people are still under the impression, very much so because of the current media narrative, that, oh, well, one trip can equal to 10 years of therapy. They don't necessarily understand that a lot of it is the therapeutic integration aspect, right? So education is going to be there for the next few years, at least, number one. And the strategy that I suggest to employ in the meantime, something that I use and also teach my students, is it's less about manifesting the right clients and more about, as Greg said, looking within myself to see how my message and my medicine, or my idea, my philosophy, my view of what integration is, how it can be expressed more clearly through me that will attract the right clients to me. So it has a lot to do with messaging. I don't know, you said that you kind of like fell into this integration business. I don't know if you're all in, as Greg was suggesting, but when you do go all in, if you have a website, if you have your mailing list, you do put out social media, then it's all going to be in your messaging that basically tells your story of integration, and that will attract the right clients.
Okay, that was great. That was very helpful. Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
You said something in there that reminded me of one of the precepts of NLP, and that is the response you get from people is a direct response to your communication. Your
Yes.
communication creates the response that you get.
Exactly. And basically, like, the more that you're, Joe, the more that you're able to, the more that we are able to clearly articulate our notion of, again, our message, then it will be more effortless for these clients to come to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jessica is asking for more resources to continue to further these ideas. So number one, we do have online courses that you can check out. One of my old websites, Psychedelic School, does have some integration courses on there. My favorite one is 30 videos and about 10 hours long, where I put a lot of my methodology in there. You can check it out, psychedelicschool.com. And Greg, tell us about how people can get in touch with you.
You can find me at psychedelicintegrationspecialist.com. And I'm surprisingly Greg at psychedelicintegrationspecialist.com.
How can people work with you? What services do you provide that can be of interest to people?
I provide psychedelic integration preparation and integration coaching. And I will say that I also do transformational coaching. And it's kind of weird to break those out, because really the transformational coaching is pretty much what I do in integration. It's just based on the information we've got from the integration for the most part. Once you get past a particular experience, it's just coaching. So I've worked with people who have social and generalized anxiety, people with depression, people who are stuck on their own spiritual or personal growth paths. I work with counselors who are trying to figure out how to work with people. I work with a lot of men who are trying to figure out what's happening in relationships or how they can relate to people better. Basically trying to help people get to the next level, whatever that means for them.
Amazing. And you also, do you want to speak a little bit about your work with the Transpersonal Center?
Yeah, Transpersonal Center is a place run by my wife, Catherine Aumann, who's a licensed marriage and family therapist, and myself. And we teach several courses that have to do with relationships. We're in the process of putting those together online, but we have a few different workshops. One is called The Science of Creating Your Soulmate, because there is a way to actually create a relationship. It has to do with working on yourself and then working on yourselves as a couple. Foundations of Conscious Touch, because within Tantra, everything starts with conscious touch, mindfulness, embodiment. And we have Secrets About Men, Secrets About Women, and a couple of others that are going to be coming up soon. I have some psychedelic talks I do. So on the 16th of this month, I'm going to be doing my talk, Microdosing, A Little Goes a Long Way, which is pretty much like a microdosing 101. Just about every question you might have about microdosing is answered in there, and there's a Q&A at the end. And on the 18th, we're going to be doing our, what event is that? On the 18th, we'll be holding our Conscious Touch workshop, which is a 2-hour online workshop, which is basically some Tantra concepts. When we teach Tantra, we tend to be, it's sort of like I do in counseling. It's not as flowery as some people might have. It's more about what you can do with this in your everyday life. So we teach people how you can use tantric concepts in your relationship right now, today, how you can implement them.
Which is another form of integration, right?
Exactly.
Yes. Awesome. So yeah, are those events listed on your site? Tara asks.
Yes, they'll be on my site and also on Facebook. I'm Psychedelic Integration Specialist, and my events are always on there. You can look me up on Facebook, and I'm Greg Lawrence and Psychedelic Integration Specialist on Facebook.
Awesome. Awesome. Beautiful. So you can keep in touch with Greg, certainly. We're out of time. We always conclude with, what is your favorite song?
Oh God, Born Too Slow by Crystal Method.
Okay. Born Too Slow by Crystal
Just got an F yeah vibe to it.
And those of you who don't know, I'm friends with Greg on Facebook. Sometimes he posts photos of him from his youth and total punk rock. Yeah, but you don't even know. Just remain curious. Yeah, Greg.
Yes, in my youth, I was this lead singer in a punk rock band, hardcore punk rock band. Yes. Also a form of integration.
Exactly. I love it. I love it. And one last thing before we go, if you would do anything differently, what would be your advice to anyone who's starting out in a short sense?
Wow, if I would do anything differently, I would not dot my ability so much to be able to help people with my life experience. So not so much from books and things. Everything that's happened to me has happened for a reason. And believe it or not, people who, if you go into this business, people who have backgrounds like yours are going to be placed right in front of you, and you're going to understand what's happening to them. And I would also tell myself, listen. No, really listen. Be quiet, don't nod, don't react, just hear what people are saying and listen for what they're not saying as well.
Especially to what they're not saying.
Yes.
So good. Thank you so much, Greg. It was such
Thank
an
you.
honor to sit with you in this room. And I cannot wait to genuinely witness, if this is what has happened in just 5 short years, what will the next 5 years bring? And actually, let's all of us right here who are present right now, take a moment literally to close your eyes. As you know, reality all begins with a vision. Everything you see around you right now literally used to be a vision in someone's imagination. So what is your vision for a better life, a better world? What is your contribution to our collective human evolution, our integration, returning to nature, supporting one another? What is your vision? What is possible for you in 5 years? And then, of course, when you get clear on that, that's half the work is done. You release it, you release that intention, and you trust that whatever needs to happen on your path will happen with you, for you, and you will continue doing that work and taking action to turn that vision into a realization for all of us to benefit from. So thank you so much to each and every single one of you. We, again, thank you so much for our guest, Greg Lawrence. I love you so much, appreciating you and your journey. My best.
Love you, sister. Miss you.
Bless you. And please follow us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, the Psyched Soul, and subscribe to our mailing list if you want to keep learning about upcoming events, which we always try to hold accessible at no cost. And also share these events with your community, with anyone that you feel will benefit from these conversations. Help us grow the community and find the others, so we can all enjoy them. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone. Have a wonderful, wonderful week.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.